In western Russia's Kursk Oblast, a trio of Ukraine's heaviest brigades is in a close fight with Russian Marines and North Korean soldiers attacking from two directions. It's an apocalyptic fight that's costing the Russians and possibly the North Koreans, as well potentially dozens of vehicles and hundreds of lives. That doesn't mean the Russians won't win. The Kremlin has built a manpower machine to pump replacement troops into the fight. The machine can't function forever, of course, but there's no sign it'll run out of raw material anytime soon. On the Kursk direction, the enemy has regrouped. The Ukrainian Center for Defense Strategies concluded. On August 6th, a powerful Ukrainian force, perhaps a dozen 400-person battalions from half a dozen brigades, burst through Russian defenses along the border in Kursk and quickly contested 400 square miles of the oblast. Kyiv's aim, it seems, was to grab a chunk of Russia in order to improve its position in any future armistice negotiations. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his forces to recapture Kursk by October, a deadline they obviously missed. But Russian counterattacks did chip away at the salient, gradually reducing Ukrainian control to around 270 square miles. Now Putin wants the rest of Kursk back, and he's clearly willing to trade thousands of Russian lives for it. His renewed sense of urgency may be related to Republican Donald Trump's victory in the U.S. presidential election on November 5. Trump has vowed to end the war in Ukraine before his January inauguration. Trump's long-shot proposal, which currently lacks a realistic enforcement mechanism, would freeze the front line at its current position. For Ukraine, that would mean losing 45,000 square miles of occupied territory. For Russia, it would mean losing 270 square miles of Kursk. Unless, of course, those Russian Marines and their thousands of North Korean allies can retake Kursk before a possible ceasefire. The Russian effort is rushed and sloppy. Barreling toward Ukrainian positions in factory-fresh BTR-82 wheeled armored personnel carriers starting November 7, Russians and allies from the 810th Naval Infantry Brigades have attacked the northern edge of the salient. At the same time, the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, a unit that's notorious for its war crimes, is attacking farther to the west. Three heavily armed Ukrainian formations, the 95th Air Assault Brigade, the 47th Mechanized Brigade with its American-made M1 tanks and M2 fighting vehicles, and the recently reorganized 17th Heavy Mechanized Brigade, are blowing up infantry-laden BTRs nearly as fast as the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade can send them. After a cursory survey of drone videos, open-source intelligence analysts have identified at least 3 BTR graveyards in and around the village of Pogrebki. Graphic footage depicts heaps of dead Russians, but a few BTRs have managed to run the gauntlet of Ukrainian mines, drones, artillery, and missiles to push back the front line more than a mile from its October position. And more Russians and allies are coming. The allies aren't just North Koreans. According to the Center for Defense Strategies, a Russian training facility in occupied Crimea is also funneling mercenaries from African countries and Cuba into the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade. Ukraine invaded the Kursk region over the summer, shocking Russia in the first invasion of the country since World War II. But Ukraine's incursion hasn't stopped Russia's steady advancement in the eastern part of Ukraine, where its army chief has warned his forces are facing one of the most powerful Russian offensives since the start of the war. Moscow is also unleashing near-constant waves of long-range drone strikes on Ukrainian cities and firing decoy drones without warheads to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses, according to a spokesperson for Ukraine's Air Force. The Ukrainian president said from Budapest on Thursday that world leaders are not listening hard enough to his pleas to allow Kyiv to use long-range weapons as it faces a new wave of escalation involving the army of another state in the war against Ukraine. All of this comes amid questions about Ukraine's future, with US President-elect Donald Trump set to take office in January. Trump has promised to end the war in 24 hours. Throughout his election campaign, Trump and his running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, cast doubts on continued US commitment to Kyiv. They made comments suggesting the US could pressure Ukraine into an uneasy truce with Russia, causing Kyiv and its NATO allies to brace for the possibility of a dramatic reduction in US support 2.5 years after Moscow invaded. On Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin made his first public comments on the US election, saying he is ready for dialogue with the Republican president-elect, and noting that Trump's comments on ending Russia's war in Ukraine deserve attention at the very least. Trump and Zelensky spoke the day after the election, when the Ukrainian president called to congratulate the president-elect for what a source briefed on the call described as a positive conversation. Trump put the call on speaker, and tech billionaire Elon Musk joined the conversation. The call was roughly 7 minutes long, and no policy was discussed, according to a source with knowledge of the situation.